Imagine for a second that it's Sunday morning. And I'm not talking about, a lazy brunch at 11. I'm talking about 5 a.m.
5 a.m., it's pitch black outside.
Pitch black. The rest of the neighborhood is completely asleep. But you are standing up, fully dressed, and you're reciting this specific set of promises.
And you're not just mumbling them. This is a life-altering commitment. It's called a pledge.
Or mengsa, right, to use the specific Korean term from our source material today.
Mengsa, yeah, it's a serious word for a serious act.
It sounds it. And honestly, the document we're diving into today it's serious. It's heavy. Welcome back to The Deep Dive.
It really is.
Today we're unpacking a speech that is, frankly, massive in its scope. It's titled, One Sovereignty, the Mandate of the Heavenly Independence Army.
And it was delivered by Reverend Myung Moon on November 21st, 1982. The setting is Belvedere. That's his estate, a training center in New York. So you have to picture the scene. You've got hundreds of followers. It's super early in the morning. The Cold War is just freezing the world in fear. And here's this man proposing a total restructuring of reality.
And when we say restructuring, we really mean it. We're not just summarizing a sermon about being nice to your neighbor.
No, not at all.
We're looking at a worldview where love is described as an atomic bomb.
Where eating a pretzel is a spiritual act.
And where being yelled at by strangers is considered like the ultimate sign of your success.
It's a total inversion of how we normally see daily life. Our mission today is to walk through this worldview, step by step.
Okay.
We need to understand how he constructs this universe, the specific roles he gives to men and women, and why he believes he's leading an army that fights without any guns.
So let's just jump right into the deep end. The speech starts by laying out the geography of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Usually when we talk about morality, the spectrum, right? There's good, there's bad, and then there's this huge gray area where, most of us live.
Right.
But looking at these notes, he doesn't seem to believe in gray areas at all.
No, not a bit. The geography here is strictly binary. He says humanity is stuck between two distinct opposing realms. Heaven, which is God's domain, and hell, or the secular world, which is Satan's domain.
He talks about a line.
Yeah.
I found this visual really striking, like a literal line separating them.
Right. And the crucial part is how gravity works around that line. He explains that living above the line in the heavenly realm takes constant, intense effort.
Like swimming upstream.
Exactly, or holding a weight over your head, but falling below the line. Well, that doesn't mean you went out and did something terrible.
That was the surprising part for me. I usually think of sin as an action, as doing something actively bad.
But he defines it differently. He says to fall below the line, you just have to get dull or loose.
You just stop trying.
You just stop trying. It's a natural slump. If you just follow your body and relax, you drift into hell.
He uses this analogy about food that, I think everyone can relate to, but he flips it. He asks the audience, do you like Chinese food?
Right.
And, personally, I love Chinese food. Who doesn't?
Of course. In a normal context, a nice meal is just a simple pleasure. But in this theology, he argues that if you go eat delicious Chinese food every day and you're enjoying yourself, that is actually below the line.
Wait, hold on. Just because it tastes good?
Because it prioritizes the body. It pleases the self. And he contrasts this with someone who decides to eat the worst, most tasteless bread.
The crusts nobody else wants.
Yeah, exactly. So they can save money or energy for the mission. That act, eating terrible food, is above the line.
It's almost an ascetic view, like comfort is a danger zone.
It is. Comfort makes you forget the urgency. And he takes this even further into something much more personal, conception, the actual creation of a life.
This part was intense. He paints this picture of two different couples having a baby, and he claims the baby's spiritual status depends entirely on the parent's mindset.
Yes. So, scenario one. A couple goes out on a classic date. They party, they drink, dance, have a great time, they come home and conceive a child.
Which, in the secular world, sounds like a fun Saturday night.
A fun night. But he says that baby is conceived below the line.
Because the act was rooted in self-pleasure.
Correct. Now, compare that to the second couple. They're poor, they're working hard for the mission, maybe they've been apart for months.
Right.
They meet briefly, eat that tasteless bread we mentioned, they pray with gratitude, and then they conceive.
And that baby is spiritually different.
In his view, that baby is without a doubt on the heavenly side, and it really drives home his definition of hell.
It's not fire and brimstone.
No, it's a state of mind defined by two words, Me first.
Me first. So that's the core of it.
That is the root of all evil in this speech. He says Satan starts big, but always, always shrinks down to the self. The heavenly way is the opposite. It denies the self for the family for the nation for the cosmos. It's a constant expansion of responsibility.
This idea of expanding responsibility, it segues perfectly into how he talks about men and women. There's a huge section on gender dynamics, and
It's complex. It is deeply layered.
it feels very 1980s, but also tied to, ancient history.
He's trying to explain the feminist movement, all the social changes, through his theological lens. And he starts by acknowledging that throughout history, women have been victimized.
Okay, so he's not ignoring that.
No, he highlights it. He says they've been treated like commodities, spoils of war. But then he introduces this hill analogy to explain what's happening now.
The hill. Okay, can you walk us through that?
Sure. Imagine God's providence, this whole project of fixing the world, as climbing a really steep hill. He says that on the way up, men had to take the lead. They were, physically stronger in that context, so they were pulling the women up behind them.
And that's his explanation for patriarchy.
For the traditional structure, yes. But he claims they are now nearing the crest of the hill, the tipping point.
So the dynamic has to change.
It has to flip. To go over the top and into the new age, men are exhausted from the climb. Now women must take the initiative and lead the men over.
So the rise of women's leadership isn't just a social trend for him. It's a cosmic necessity.
Precisely. And he points specifically to American women. He says they're at the very top of this providential hill. He sees that in America, women have power, they're educated, articulate.
And he frames the women's rights movement not as political, but as something God orchestrated.
Exactly, to prepare the position of the bride.
That sounds, on the surface, that sounds empowering. But then he pivots.
He does.
He draws a direct line from powerful women to the rise of homosexuality. What's the logic there?
Yeah, it's a really controversial point, but to understand it, you have to follow his internal logic. He argues that because women have become so powerful, maybe aggressive, men have become intimidated.
And he claims that fear causes men to retreat from women.
And separate themselves into homosexual behavior, yes. He sees it as this chaotic transition period where the trust is broken. He even brings up Elvis Presley as an example of this. Chaos.
I was waiting for this. Poor Elvis. What did he do?
It comes back to that me first idea. Moon looks at a superstar like Elvis, someone who obsesses over their looks, their makeup, their allure, and he calls it satanic effort.
Satanic seems like a strong word for a sequin jumpsuit.
But it's about the direction of the energy. Elvis draws attention to himself, people scream and cry for him.
Right.
To Moon, that is the opposite of the heavenly way, which is stern and controlled. He tells the story about women trying to entice him.
Oh, right. He says, when women approach him, he becomes stern and severe. He won't even shake their hands.
It's all about maintaining that rigid line we talked about. He sees the softness of pop culture as a trap that pulls you below that line.
And that rigidness has to create friction with the outside world. If you're living above the line in a world that's mostly below the line, eating Chinese food and listening to Elvis.
Massive friction. And this leads to one of the most interesting psychological parts of the speech. His reframing of persecution.
Right. Normally, if a bunch of people are yelling at you, calling you names,
or saying you're in a cult.
Yeah, the natural reaction is to think, maybe I'm doing something wrong.
Social pressure is designed to correct behavior. But here, the logic is completely inverted. He tells his followers that when people call them Moonies, it's a blessing.
A blessing. How does he even justify that?
Because it confirms they're on the right side of the line.
Yeah.
He says, if the secular world loved them and invited them to parties, that would be bad news.
It would mean they'd lost their edge, that they'd slipped.
Exactly. So the world's hostility is proof of their holiness. It's a powerful insulation mechanism. And he uses this really vivid analogy to justify their recruitment tactics. The fireman analogy.
This one was graphic. He talks about throwing people out of windows.
He compares his movement to a fireman entering a burning hotel. He says, look, if a building is on fire, a fireman is justified in throwing someone out a window to save their life.
It might hurt. They might scream.
But it's an act of ultimate goodness because it saves their life.
So gathering people out of the secular world, even if it upsets their family or ruins their college plans, is like throwing them out of a burning building.
That's the justification.
Yeah.
He frames the whole world as a burning hotel. He says New York City is worse than Sodom and Gomorrah.
So says there's no time for politeness.
You don't knock when the house is on fire, it's an emergency. And to survive it, he uses another image himself at the top of a tree in a hurricane.
The tree analogy.
He's at the very top, holding on while the winds of opposition blow, and he tells the members, "You are the ropes anchoring the tree." But those ropes have to reach all the way to the ground.
It's a call for them to ground the movement, to hold on no matter what.
Yes. If the anchor moves, the tree falls. It puts the responsibility for his safety right on their faith.
Which brings us to the title of the speech, The Heavenly Independence Army. He's not just a fireman, he's a general. And being in America, he reaches for a very specific historical figure.
George Washington.
George Washington.
This is a fascinating bit of rhetoric. He says, look at Washington from the British perspective. To the king, Washington wasn't a hero. He was a traitor.
Right. If he'd been caught, he would have been executed.
And Moon applies this to himself. He says Satan sees him as a traitor because he's stealing Satan's people and property, but to God, he's the hero.
So he reframes the whole movement as an independence army fighting to liberate the world from that me-first culture.
Exactly.
But this army isn't using rifles, right?
No, he's very clear on that. Their weapons are truth and love, but he describes them with very aggressive martial language.
He calls love an atomic bomb.
The atomic bomb of love. It sounds like a contradiction, but think about the physics. An atomic bomb creates a chain reaction.
I see.
He wants a chain reaction of goodness that's so explosive it just wipes out corruption, aggressive benevolence. And he believes this bomb is the only thing that can counter the other global superpower of the time, communism.
We have to remember, this is 1982. The Cold War is the backdrop for all of this.
And he sees his movement as the spiritual counterweight. He pits one world under God against one world under Marx. And in this war, he identifies two key nations.
America and Korea, a geopolitical alliance.
But it's a distinct hierarchy. America represents the world, the microcosm. He says America must serve the world to survive. He's very critical of American selfishness. He mentions the Yankee go home sentiment.
Saying it's because America stopped serving and started taking.
And Korea.
Korea is the fatherland of faith. He calls it an Babel-type nation. He cites this history of suffering, claiming it was invaded 931 times but never invaded anyone.
So that suffering qualifies it to lead spiritually.
In his view, yes.
Yeah.
Which leads to a very practical and I imagine very difficult requirement for his followers. He says that the culture of this new world starts with language.
Right. This must have been a shock to some of the Americans in the room. He says they all have to learn Korean.
He calls it the mother tongue of the heavenly kingdom.
And he uses that encyclopedia analogy. Yeah, he says, look, if the best encyclopedia in the world was only in Korean, scholars would just learn Korean to read it. Well, he says, the Encyclopedia of Heaven, his teachings, is in Korean. So you need the language.
He even lays this heavy guilt trip on them about the afterlife.
Oh, a heavy one. He says, when you get to the spirit world, your ancestors will shame you. They'll say, you lived at the same time as the true parents, you saw them, but you didn't even bother to learn their language.
It's all part of his vision for a world without borders.
The abolition of boundaries. He suggests if everyone learned the divine principle in Korean, immigration offices would just become obsolete.
And he creates this image of a museum of the future in the kingdom of heaven and tells the people sitting right there in front of him, you are the museum pieces.
It's a brilliant way to give their daily struggles this huge historical significance. He says in that future museum, Washington and Lincoln won't be the main attractions.
The members of this army will be.
Right, and he asks them, do you want to be a priceless artifact or a cheap one?
It puts so much pressure on their daily performance. Every action, every meal is being cataloged for eternity.
Exactly. It elevates the mundane to the monumental.
As we wrap this up, I want to look at the very end of the speech. He circles back to that pledge we started with, the Mangsa.
He recites the core points. One sovereignty, one people, one land, one language, one true parent family tradition, and one world of heart. It's a completely totalizing vision.
But then right in the middle of all this cosmic battle talk, he drops this really human, almost funny little detail about pretzels.
I loved this detail. It just grounds everything. He's talking about poverty, about eating that tasteless bread, and he mentions eating pretzels from street vendors.
Right. And he notes that the word pretzel sounds like blessing.
Pretzel and blessing.
Is a bit of a stretch.
It is, linguistically, but conceptually it works. He's saying when you eat a pretzel in poverty, you should feel you're receiving a blessing. It just captures that ability to reframe hardship as joy.
Which is central to that above-the-line mentality.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for us, for the listener today who maybe isn't planning on joining a cosmic army?
I think the ultimate challenge this text poses, regardless of your beliefs, is this question of citizenship versus volunteerism.
How so?
He ends by telling them they're volunteer soldiers. They aren't drafted. They choose this incredibly difficult life. And he challenges them to define a citizen of heaven, not by what they have, rights, property, comfort, but by their willingness to put the cosmos over the self.
It's a provocative thought. In your own life, what sovereignty are you living under? Are you living for me first, or are you volunteering for something bigger?
And are you willing to eat the tasteless bread to get there?
That is the question. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into a very complex worldview. We will catch you next time.
Goodbye.